Remember the Swordsplosion from the Assault on Dragon's Keep Borderlands 2 DLC, the weapon they also used to promote Wonderlands? Well, we found it in the game and it's pretty wild. Just like a Rain of Arrows shotgun, which completely changed the way shotguns work. We got a saw blade assault rifle, so a ton of legendaries to go over, but I want to start with the Swordsplosion. Because just like the Borderlands 2 version, this one shoots swords, which then explode on impact, dealing quite a lot of damage and easily cleaning out lower health targets. But you also got the way more interesting impact version, which you can of course easily switch to. With this, the 3 swords you shoot will stick to the enemies instead and explode on a reload or after a pretty decent amount of time. And you already see it, but when they explode, this awesome sword appears, which doesn't only deal a lot of damage, but can also send certain enemies like iron skins, cyclopses and skeletons flying, sometimes killing them instantly, or otherwise they're just nuked to the ground, so it takes a pretty long time for them to get back up, and they do not possess a problem for a few moments, so you can also easily finish them off. The item card notes that stuck swords also increase damage by 30% each, so the more onto one target, the higher the damage of the explosion will be. So also nice against bosses, although the damage was kind of a letdown against the Banshee, while the Parasite from the Tangled Drift side region was way more vulnerable against these swords. The range is also amazing, so even bosses at a longer range can be hit by the blades, which is great. And I got it from this trial boss, which you encounter during the main mission. That one takes you to the Drowned Abyss, then go to the Dryas Gallery fast travel point if you want to repeat this boss. Go to the God's Well portal to then reach the boss fight again. And of course, if he doesn't immediately respawn for you, just continue with the main story a bit after defeating the boss for the first time and then come back later. Now, it could only be that the dedicated drop source for this amazing shotgun is a different enemy we just don't know yet, but I will keep you posted here when we know more about dedicated drop sources. Also, I will tell you about it in the pinned comment when there's already new info, including for the other weapons we talk about in this video, like the Crossblade of Discipline. So while the raw damage on the item card is lower, this shotgun can have a better damage per second compared to the Swordsplosion. It can also be spammed for longer before you have to reload. And next to that amazing damage, it's also great that this Crossblade of 2 elements that you send towards the target can pass through objects and enemies. So you do not only hit multiple enemies very easily, but can also shoot enemies behind cover, making it a really nice weapon to get a death save when you're in the Save Your Soul mode. And you also find a plus 150% gun and critical hit chance on the weapon, so you do crits very often, which is also great with the spell shot I'm using, so I can refresh my spells more often. It's also surprisingly good against bosses, and the fact that you can combine 2 elements can also be helpful. I found the Frost and Fire variant from the loot bunnies at the end of the endgame Chaos Chamber activity, but you got a different variant, right, Dennis?
Yeah, that's right. The one I got is slightly different in the fact that instead of a fire projectile, I have a frost and a dark magic projectile. So with that version, you're also getting health back from the damage you're dealing. And I 100% agree with you on this one. I really like the Crossblade thanks to the great damage and the fact that it works great against both groups of enemies and bosses.
And you got some pretty awesome other legendaries as well, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I have a shotgun that fires a barrage of arrows, as well as an assault rifle that shoots bursts of soul blades, so some pretty crazy stuff.
We will totally go over them. Of course, if you like the video so far, then leaving a like on it would really help us out, and subscribe for way more Wonderlands content if you haven't already. Further reading reached out with a pro tip for the Ragnarok of the Assassin Legendary Sword I went over also in the previous video. I will link to it at the end of this one, saying that the arcs it shoots count as melee attacks for breaking dices and marble collectibles. So yes, this means that you can skip the platforming puzzles or simply break these even if you don't know how to reach them. Like, you won't need the loot from these dices anyways, only the loot luck increases you get by collecting them. So this is totally a very nice tactic, thanks for sharing. Another new melee weapon I found is the Pack Leg of Murph, which is great as like an offhand melee weapon when you're not really into this improved combat. Doing a melee attack on an enemy namely increases your movement speed by 30% and your reload speed by 40% for 10 seconds. So if you basically hit an enemy every 10 seconds, then you can have the extra movement and reload speed active throughout the whole combat encounter, which is very nice. I also got the echo roll on this one, so I got lucky with this, because this makes sure that the melee attacks I do will have 10% bonus damage based on all the non-melee damage I dealt over the last 10 seconds. So that single melee attack you do can also deal a lot of damage if you were wrecking house before that. So I really like this playstyle, also because as a spell shot, every reload gives you the spell weaving stack, so being able to reload weapons faster is just great. And Dennis, you discovered something interesting.
Yeah, when you mentioned this item, the pegleg name did ring a bell, and after checking my vault, I found that you get a very similar unique weapon after completing the main story quest Ballad of Bones. This unique blue variant, LeChan's Last Leg, has a very similar perk to the pegleg. The initial buffs are lower, you only get 15 extra movement speed and 10% extra reload speed, but you can stack this effect up to 3 times. So effectively, while you need multiple hits with the unique version, the legendary pegleg just gives you all the buffs after a single melee hit. So we already showed you some pretty amazing shotguns in this video, but in my opinion, the next one takes the cake. It is the Rain of Arrows, which, like the Swordsplosion, also dropped from Drill for me. As soon as you equip the weapon, you can already see it's going to do something special, because instead of a crosshair to help you aim, you project a giant circle on the ground to show you where your shot is going to land. When you fire, you shoot a burst of arrows at the target location, which will damage enemies when they impact. However, after the initial arrows land, a magical arrow barrage will appear from the sky, dealing damage in an even larger area than the target circle. And the damage on this arrow barrage is really good. I tried it during some obelisk encounters and was able to breeze through both the regular enemies and the bosses that spawned. Obviously, the weapon works great against groups of enemies thanks to the pretty big AoE radius, but the damage it can do on bosses really shouldn't be underestimated. Its only real downside is that it eats through ammo really quickly. Each shot costs 6 ammo, meaning that even though my magazine size is 7, I can only fire twice before I have to reload. Now the reload is pretty quick, so that's not the problem here, but if you haven't bought any shotgun SDUs yet, you're going to be burning through all of your ammo really quickly. Now as cool as an arrow barrage shotgun is, there's one weapon that I've absolutely fallen in love with, and that is the Bread Slicer. This assault rifle dropped from one of the loot bunnies at the end of a Chaos Chamber run for me. It has some great stats like a huge magazine size, even further boosted by some of my skills, good accuracy and a great rate of fire. But the thing that sets it apart is that instead of firing bullets, this Bread Slicer fires 3 saw blades in a spread pattern. The saw blades are shot at an arc, and when hitting the ground they will keep bouncing and rolling until they hit a wall, but they are able to pass through enemies. Because of the fact that you fire your projectiles at an arc, it can be tricky to hit flying enemies, but that's really the only thing the Bread Slicer struggles with. Apart from that, this gun works great in pretty much any situation. It can clear out mobs of enemies in no time thanks to the high fire rate and magazine size, but it also deals massive damage against badasses and bosses, especially if you manage to hit all 3 blades on the target. And since finding it, this has become my go-to weapon for Chaos Chambers, because as long as I have one different weapon to deal with flying targets, I don't need anything else to make it to the end. I've even seen clips of other players who found an elemental version of this, so if you're lucky you can find a variant that can shoot burning saw blades as well. Yeah, I think I might need that version too. So, I'm off to farm some more. Remember to leave a like if you liked the video, subscribe to make sure you don't miss the next one, and if you're curious about more of the amazing legendaries in Wonderlands, you can watch our previous video by clicking on the screen. We will see you in the next one. Goodbye!